Fabrizio.
Sentite?
Bene,
Sì.
bene.
Aspetta un attimo che voglio che provare con le cuffie perché così evitiamo rumori. Mi sentite?
Sì, benissimo. Fabrizio,
Eccomi.
ho parlato poco fa con Enrico a cui ho detto che lui aprirà immediatamente lui.
Sì.
E eventualmente o dà la parola a te oppure direttamente alla ministra.
Ok. Perfetto.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, Enrico.
Very good.
How are you?
Hi, CK. How are you?
Great.
I am so sorry, but as you can see from the mark behind me, I'm in Paris. And I'm in Charles de Gaulle Airport. So
Okay.
I'm so sorry because I have to wear my mask, but I'm in a public space.
Oh,
So
I see. Okay. Fabrizio told me that you are in Rome.
No, I'm in Paris today, and I'm catching a flight to go to Rome, but I'm in Paris now. How are you, CK?
I'm great, thank you.
How is Katie?
She's fine, and thank you for everything. Huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Valerio, we ready?
Not yet.
Not yet. Fabrizio, are you there?
Sì, ci sono. I am here. Ciao Enrico.
Where are you?
I'm in Paris.
I'm in Paris too.
Yeah, I thought you were in Rome, so that was my.
Yes.
I misled CK. You are flying now to Rome. Okay.
Exactly.
I wasn't too far off.
So I hope we can travel next year, Enrico.
I hope so, because I need traveling. Without traveling,
Yes.
it's not life.
Exactly. And I don't know. Do you think they will have a deal this weekend? They will still be
On Brexit?
Yes.
I bet always. I'm always optimistic, so I bet on the yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right.
There is a deal on the budget and the recovery fund, so that's already tremendous progress.
Yeah.
Poland and Hungary, they accepted the proposal.
Yeah.
Valerio, are we okay?
Still checking for some guests, but I'll be soon. I'll be back.
How's the weather in Singapore, CK?
You know, year end is always a little wet, but cooler as well. Wet and cool. So you're delayed 1 year. You told me that you were coming in February, and this next February is coming soon.
Exactly. It's February 2021, hopefully, because we don't know yet.
Enrico, nice to see you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay, Enrico.
Fantastic.
So after Enrico finishes this webinar, and then he's catching the plane
Yeah,
to Rome. Okay.
to Rome. Yeah.
Wow, you're really busy, huh, Enrico?
It's not a very, it's not a very original flight.
Yeah. And Jana is coming with you to Rome?
No, Jama is in Rome now.
Oh, okay. Already.
She's in Rome.
Okay.
But I was here in Paris just for 2 days.
All right. Okay. I think later Catherine wants to say hello to you. I said, no, you can't. This is too high powered. And I told her I will send her love to you.
Can we have confirmation that
I will check.
The minister office is online?
Yeah. She said 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, that's fine. No problem.
I just got the WhatsApp message telling me that they will be there in 2 minutes.
And then I see for the next panel, I see Romeo. Yes, you're there.
I'm here.
Yeah, and I saw before the JP Morgan office, I haven't seen Filippo, but I spoke with him half an hour ago, and I saw his office appearing on the screen, so we should be fine.
Fabrizio, ma tu riuscirai ad andare a Pisa poi per Natale o no?
Io spero proprio di sì. Noi abbiamo l'aereo il 18, il 20, che è l'ultimo giorno disponibile.
Perché mi sa che è più facile andarci per te da Parigi che
Sì.
da Roma, nel senso che da Roma posso andare da solo e solo per i problemi di salute di mio padre, se no con la famiglia non posso andarci.
Ma neanche se vai prima del 20, del 21?
Ho capito come si fa ad andare prima del 20. No, nel senso che io ho Francesco
scuola.
che fa scuola,
no,
fa
noi
scuola in
finiamo.
presenza, fa scuola in presenza poi.
No, noi la scuola finisce il 20 e insomma il 18. Peraltro dopodomani torna Caspa, domani torna Caspa, quindi siamo tutti super eccitati.
Immagino Anton.
Esatto.
My MOF says that as you know, our minister, second minister of finance, and the Secretary General of the Ministry of Finance, both are on. So one of them is already on camera. I don't know which one.
We can see you, but you are on mute.
Oh, okay. Both of us are on.
Okay, hello. Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you too, all of you.
Shall we start? The minister and our permanent secretary are already online.
Okay. Can I start, Valerio?
I would say yes, but Fabrizio, if you agree, we can.
Absolutely.
Okay. So thanks a lot, everyone, for being with us. I'm so sorry because I'm in a public space, in an airport now, so I will be short, but I feel in a very exotic place in this very moment, even if it is only Paris airport. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to Muzinich. Thank you to Fabrizio Pagani. Muzinich is a great partner for us. It's a firm based in an investment firm based in New York City, and it is very this seminar, this webinar on the future of the relationship, the economic and financial relationship between Italy and Singapore. I have to say, just in one word, that we are at the end of a tremendous year for achievements in the relationship between European Union and ASEAN, Italy and ASEAN, Italy and Singapore. In the last days, we had the great news of the upgrade of the relationship between the European Union and ASEAN at a strategic partnership. That is a great achievement, and the good news that High Representative and Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Borrell, will attend for the first time the Defense Minister Council of ASEAN countries. This is a tremendous year for Italy too, because we had also the fantastic upgrade of our bilateral relationships. So it's for us, it's very good, it's very positive. And of course, the possibility to work together is depending on the relaunch, on how to get out from the pandemic and how to react after the recession. And the role of finance is crucial. This is why this seminar, this webinar, I stop here immediately, and Fabrizio Pagani will lead the seminar. Fabrizio, up to you.
Well, thank you, Enrico. Thank you for the kind words vis-à-vis Muzinich, and if I may say, you know, the Associazione Italia-ASEAN is indeed not only a great partner, but it's also a sort of phare, of really lighthouse in the relationships between Europe and Southeast Asia and beyond. I will, you know, without much further ado, I will give the floor to Minister Indranee. I'm not sure where she is. There she is. Her Excellency is there. Hello. It's a great pleasure. It's a great honor to have you here with us. Minister Indranee is Minister in the Prime Minister's Office of Singapore and leader of the House, one of the most talented and experienced politicians in Singapore. And we are grateful to her, and we are grateful to, let me say, also to Singapore for the leadership that has shown in this difficult year. You know, when we look at statistics, when we look at the data, when we look at governance, Singapore came always up as first or second in the way you have dealt with this tremendous challenge that we had this year. I'm also very pleased to say that Singapore will partner with Italy, and I speak a bit in my former position of G20 Sherpa for Italy, because as you know, Italy will have the presidency of the G20 this year, and Singapore is indeed one of the main partner in this important process. Mrs. Indranee, please, I leave you the floor with great pleasure.
Thank you very much. Dr. Enrico Letta, former Prime Minister of Italy and President of the Italy-ASEAN Association, Mr. George Muzinich, founder and CEO of Muzinich Co, Giampiero Masallo, Ambassador, President of the Institute of International Political Studies, and of course, Ambassador Ao Cheo Kiet, Ambassador of Singapore to Italy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for hosting this webinar. You know, at the beginning of this year, a meeting would have been considered unthinkable, but it's become the new normal. There is hope on the horizon with news of the vaccine, but it is still early days, and so this will continue for a while longer. The world is at an inflection point. We have faced crises before, but COVID-19 has challenged us all in unprecedented ways. Countries around the world have been forced to take extraordinary measures to mitigate the health, economic, and social fallouts. We've undergone lockdowns, closed borders, and faced severe disruptions of international travel. And in spite of our best efforts, it has sometimes been the case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or the other way around. Nevertheless, this global pause that has been forced on us also presents us with an opportunity to reflect on what led us here and let us think how we can regroup to reinvent, rebuild, and renew. Since the late 90s and the early 2000s, there has been growing disillusionment with unfettered globalization. Even before COVID-19, multilateralism was under siege. Nationalism and populism were on the rise. And yet, as we can see from the current situation, the best hope for humanity is when we work together, not when we pull apart or when we are polarized. The international cooperation leading to the development of vaccines for COVID-19 is a visible demonstration on how cooperation and collaboration can be a positive force. We should therefore not reject multilateralism, but rather see how we can make it work better than it did before. COVID has brought the whole world to an inflection point, and we shouldn't waste this opportunity to reshape the future for the better. Let's use this hiatus to think deeply about the shape of the economies and the institutions that we are rebuilding. Think about how we can make them strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive, and with a strong sense of collective responsibility towards our people, our planet, and prosperity for all. I'd like to offer a few thoughts, if I may, as a prelude to the many ideas that I'm sure that the august list of speakers will be speaking on later. First, starting with Singapore and Italy. Our countries enjoy strong and long-standing bilateral relations. Italy was one of the first few countries which established diplomatic relations with Singapore after our independence in 1965. And since then, our ties have grown from strength to strength. This is reflected in the Italian presence in Singapore, where the community is one of the fastest growing among the EU countries. Italy is also a key economic partner for Singapore. It's our fifth largest goods trading partner in Europe. There are currently more than 700 Italian firms in Singapore, many of which use their offices here as launch pads to oversee regional operations and expansion. Italian and EU businesses can benefit significantly from the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, or the EU-FTA. The agreement eliminates virtually all tariffs on bilateral goods trade between the EU and Singapore and enhances market access for the services and government procurement sectors. Recognizing the importance of climate change and sustainable development, the EU-FTA also seeks to maintain level playing fields for Singapore and EU companies in renewable energy generation and to encourage greater bilateral exchanges on sustainable development. As we rebuild our economies, we should strengthen our partnership by looking at new ways to drive sustainable growth. For instance, our Economic Development Board is exploring collaborations with Italian companies Ansaldo and Enel to use hydrogen as a low-carbon alternative fuel. Agriculture and food technology, or agri-food tech for short, is another area we are keen to develop as we look towards innovation to ensure Singapore's food security. Beyond the well-established Italian brands like Barilla and Ferrero, we welcome more Italian food companies to enter the Singapore market. I should tell you, we all love Italian food here in Singapore, so plenty of opportunity there. The agri-food tech market in Italy is booming, with 1 in 10 Italian startups operating in the agri-food tech business. Singapore has set a 30 by 30 goal, that is, to produce 30% of our nutritional needs locally by 2030. There is thus great potential for collaboration with Italy in areas like high-tech farming and alternative protein development. As digitalization becomes much more pervasive in a post-COVID world, there is tremendous scope for our two countries to cooperate in areas like fintech and cybersecurity. Second, we should strengthen economic links between ASEAN and Europe. The Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP, has enhanced trade relations between countries across the Pacific Ocean. More recently, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, which was signed just last month, was a clear signal that the 15th Asia-Pacific countries remain dedicated to upholding rules-based free trade order and supply chain connectivity. As country coordinator for ASEAN-EU dialogue relations, Singapore is committed to enhancing our region-to-region ties. The EU is one of ASEAN's oldest dialogue partners. Trade and investment relations between ASEAN and the EU continue to be substantial. The EU was both ASEAN's third largest trading partner and third largest source of foreign direct investment inflows in 2019. I'm very pleased to note that the European Union and ASEAN have recently upgraded relations from a dialogue partnership to a strategic partnership. Indeed, as fellow multilateralists, it's important for leaders on both sides to speak with one voice against unilateralism, isolationism, and protectionism in all its forms, and reinvigorate support for a rules-based international order to promote a strong and sustainable recovery for both our regions. So we hope that with will and imagination, the ASEAN-EU Free Trade Agreement, as well as the ASEAN-EU Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement, can follow to enhance the important trade links between our two regions and facilitate the movement of our peoples. Third, we need to take coordinated global action to tackle global problems. The most immediate, of course, being vaccine multilateralism, as safe and effective vaccines now offer us a new hope. Ensuring their fair, equitable, and affordable distribution is a precondition for recovery, because we can never really be safe until everyone is safe. One day, hopefully, in the not too distant future, COVID will pass. But this pandemic will not be our last. We need to strengthen global disease surveillance networks so that we will be better prepared to detect, control, and overcome the next pandemic. Multilateral cooperation under the leadership of the WHO is crucial. A major challenge we need to tackle in this area is the absence of proactive, reliable, and sustainable financing for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The international community should consider prioritizing work towards finding concrete solutions to address this. And more generally, global public goods, which brings me to my last point, climate change. Climate change represents an existential threat to all of us. We need to work closely to ensure a good outcome of COP26 led by UK and Italy, because the steps we take now will define our collective future. Speaking from a finance viewpoint, markets should be part of the solution. We should make a strong and concerted push for green finance as a means of transition to a low-carbon future. By incorporating environmental, social, and governance considerations into financing decisions, we can drive sustainable development outcomes. Capital market solutions, like green bonds, have the potential to play a more central role in financing green investments as the depth and liquidity in this market grows. Our central bank, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, has launched a Green Finance Action Plan to develop green financial solutions and markets to support a sustainable Singapore and facilitate Asia's transition towards a sustainable future. We welcome partners, especially from Italy and Europe, who have a strong tradition in this field, to join us on this journey and help us to build back better. Ladies and gentlemen, let me end with the observation that Italy takes up the G20 baton at a critical juncture of global affairs. Our challenges as a global community may be large, but the will to galvanize international cooperation is equally strong. I'm confident that under Italy's leadership, the G20 will be able to set the direction to come out of this long winter and prepare for a new spring. Singapore stands ready to support and contribute constructively to your presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for these inspiring words. I think your leadership was the best to really open this webinar, which is composed by a part devoted to finance and a part devoted to in the relationship between Singapore and Italy, but more broadly between ASEAN and European Union, in a moment which is really at the juncture of many difficult and complex challenges, including and starting with, as you said, the distribution of vaccine. On that as well. You know, when we have in Singapore, that's right. Thank you for the first panel to Romeo Orlandi, who I see on my right hand side of the screen. Romeo, please.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Good morning for my Italian and European fellows, and good afternoon for my friends from Singapore and Asia. Following the encouraging words of the former speaker, I would say that the winter of our discontent will be soon over, and there are good signs from the East that the situation may be soon consigned to history, and the bad memories that we are experiencing now will be soon over. What we see from Asia is that the situation is going quite almost back to normal, also for economic standard. We see factories are open, people are walking around and doing a high level of consumption as usual, so shopping malls are open. There's a kind of aspiration that going back to normal. So going back to this path, I would like to ask to Filippo Gori, CEO for Asia of JP Morgan, if the situation is going relatively quickly back to normal also from the banking and the financial activities in the Far East, if investments, circulation of money, solidity of financial institutions is as good as it was before. Filippo, can you comment on this?
Dr. Orlandi, thank you very much for having me. Fabrizio, it's a pleasure. If I'm allowed, before I answer your question, I would love for a second to qualify your statement about what's happening in the Far East. I think your statement might be referring to China, where things have really gone back almost to normality, but in the rest of the region, the situation is a little bit more complicated. I.e., while, for instance, Singapore is definitely on an incredible improvement, and Australia as well, for instance, is quite improving. Hong Kong, for instance, is now facing the fourth wave with the consequences that comes every time there is a wave. And traveling across the region, it is severely limited. There is traveling onshore within China, there is traveling within Australia, but across the region, it is severely limited. So that's the background, but China is almost completely back to normal. In terms of banking sector and whatever is happening from a financial standpoint, it is definitely incredible what has happened this year. Clearly, there is an element of FIFO, first in, first out. We were facing the brunt of the COVID disaster sooner than anybody else. We saw it already at the beginning of January in China, Hong Kong, towards the end of January already. And the measures that were taken prevented the virus, especially onshore in the mainland, to have everlasting damages, to the point that China has surprised most observers with an incredibly strong V-shaped recovery. And in that context, therefore, the banking sector and the overall financial sectors have recovered greatly. And if you think about it, the unprecedented amount of liquidity that the global central banks, including the Asian ones, have used to stabilize the markets and to re-kickstart the economies that were having a shock, has helped enormously financial institutions and normal corporates to strengthen or recover the balance sheet, issue bonds, issue equities, and so on and so forth. And the markets have been incredibly supportive over the past, I would say, 7 or 8 months. Therefore, there is, and I know it's a little bit of a bad verb, which is there is a decoupling, I would say, going on between what is happening from a humanitarian standpoint in the day-to-day and what's happening in the financial markets. Financial markets have been performing exceptionally resiliently and sustained the crisis probably better than we had feared. And in that context, this is because also of the swift action that government across the world and central banks across the world took, and that helped definitely the banking system. In that context, I would also say that the regulation probably implemented after the global financial crisis and made the banking industry much more resilient and much stronger, and therefore we could, while in 2008, the banking industry was the cause of the crisis. Right now, we are hopefully one of the entities that help support the economy out of the crisis.
Thank you, Filippo. And what about Europe, Fabrizio? Do you see the same contradiction between the humanitarian aspect and the financial solidity and resilience that Filippo highlighted a few moments ago?
Okay.
Fabrizio, I cannot hear you properly. Am I the only one, or there is some problem in the communication? The audio is not working well.
Can you hear me?
No.
No. I think it might be the Wi-Fi, Fabrizio. Try without the headset, please. Try now.
Fabrizio, are you there? Fabrizio? Valerio, you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Try to talk. Better.
Can you hear me?
Try. Yes.
Indeed, is also
No, not exactly.
Yeah.
There are some disconnections, and the line goes and stay.
Okay, I'll go through.
Okay. Filippo, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, let me take advantage of the word and the concept you use of decoupling. You use the expression to for the humanitarian side and for the financial side. But let's go back to the possible decoupling of the economies, like it has been said for many weeks now. Apparently, the former American administration tried to decouple China and sometimes the rest of Asia from the US. I have a double question for you. Do you think this industrial decoupling will ever be possible? And if the answer is yes, or relatively yes, what possibly could be the repercussions for Southeast Asia? Do you think it's possible to move some industrial capabilities from China to Southeast Asia quickly?
Okay, so in terms of the first answer, question, my answer is while we talk a lot about decoupling, my view of the world is that the world is far more interconnected, and it is almost, in my opinion, impossible to consider nowadays a proper decoupling in the way that at times is being presented in the press. There can be changes in the way goods are produced or distributed across the world. There might be restrictions on certain technologies, but the world is exceptionally interconnected right now. Having said this, have we seen a supply chain shift in the manufacturing sector as a consequence of the trade wars between the US and China? To that question, I would say the supply chain shift from outside of China towards Southeast Asia, in my humble opinion, had already been in place for a few years. I would say it started probably before 2015. Part of it was due to the strengthening of the RMB, which made it less compelling to produce goods in China compared to other Southeast Asian countries. And you can see probably the country that has been the recipient the most in Southeast Asia of this shift has been Vietnam. And that has been in place now for a few years. Now, as part of the trade war, the supply chain shift there's been a shift and has moved part of it further to Vietnam, part of it to Indonesia. Some part of a high level in terms of products has moved to Thailand. So that shift is happening, but those shifts to a certain extent might have happened regardless, because what I was saying, because of the strengthening of the RMB, and therefore that was probably more of a driver than anything else. So to answer your first question, I don't think decoupling in itself, the way it's presented, can happen. Supply chain shifts are already happening, but it takes a long time to move. It's not something that you do overnight.
So, in your opinion, apparently you jeopardize the possibility of reshoring in industrialized countries the former productive activities, in case they shift from China to other countries, like you mentioned Vietnam. But you don't see any possibility that a significant industrial manufacturing activity can take place again in Europe or in North America?
I would love if things go back to Europe. I just don't think that that's realistic. Something could move back to North America or to other American countries that are close to the United States if they might have some defense implications, a national defense implication. That could happen, but otherwise, the shifts that we are seeing is from China to ASEAN, and in those countries that I've mentioned. At least that's the one that I've been observing in the past 7 years in Asia Pacific. The last one being potentially India. Okay. I haven't seen the trend to go back to Europe.
Okay. So we will not see smoking chimneys again in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. I wonder if Fabrizio is back again.
Let's try. Can you hear me?
Yes, better now.
Okay, very good. So I was saying that, and I apologize for these technological issues. I was saying that the word decoupling between the humanitarian situation and the economy, and particularly markets, is indeed a fact in Europe as well, and it's very sad because the situation from a humanitarian point of view is not particularly improving in these days, and I'm referring to continental Europe and particularly to Italy. Today is a very important day for the European economy because we have a key meeting of the European Central Bank. The ECB is meeting the Governing Council is meeting as we speak, and we may have some important decision taken on the continuation of the easing programs in the early afternoon. On the status of the European economy, we don't know much. Let me be a bit provocative. I tell you what we know for certain in time of uncertainties. We know for certain that we had, I use the past tense, a V-shaped recovery during the summer. The third quarter saw really a bounce back of the economic activity across Europe, and probably the ECB is also revising upwards the data of the GDP growth in the third quarter. But at the same time, the second wave is putting a lot of sand in the wheels due to the economic restrictions and the humanitarian toll we are having. Therefore, the ECB is likely to downgrade the projection for 2021 in terms of economic growth. Let me also remind you that we do have two mechanisms of market economy which are not working properly in these moments. It differs a bit from country to country, but generally speaking, we don't know what the credit market is across Europe, and we don't know what the labor market is across Europe. We don't know what the credit market is because the governments have taken more or less the same type of measures across the continent, making possible, to have guarantees on loans from banks by banks to companies, particularly SMEs, and there has been a moratorium on repayment. This is a very important point. We are not seeing failing business yet, because everything is under a sort of freeze. We may see that, bankruptcy and NPLs in banks' balance sheet coming up in the next months, particularly probably in the second half of the spring. We will see how serious is that. And we don't see a major unemployment wave because indeed in many countries, including Italy, there is basically the impossibility of having large scale restructuring of companies because the companies are benefiting, and I would say thanks God, of government programs which help to keep people employed. That will not continue forever, but will probably go further into next years. And so once again, we will have a better, clearer picture in the second quarter of 2021. So we are a bit in a fog, if you want. There is one point which I would like to stress, and which I do believe. There's been a lot of discussion among economists on the shape of the recovery. They have used different letters, V, W, the whoosh, the sign of Nike, the Nike brand, and so on. My impression is that we will assist to a sort of K letter recovery, in which you do have a number of companies which are doing very well, and which we will indeed go back in a V shape like growth. And these are particularly high-tech companies, but not only. while you will see a number of businesses struggling, so being the second, the downwards leg of the K letter, and I think that type of business will be obviously travel, but tourism, some cultural businesses linked to culture, certain type of entertainment, not all, but certain type of entertainment. This is obvious, but what is less obvious is that a lot of small shops, small businesses, not companies itself, but more retail, mom and pop shops will be hit. And that will have a social impact in our communities. You will see, I think, and I fear, shops, closed in the center of towns. It will also be physically very visible, much more than if a company in the middle of an industrial area fails. So that may have economic consequences, but may have also social, cultural consequences. This may lead to a rethinking of the way retail shops are organized. I'm not saying is the end of it. I'm saying that they will change, and they will also change the face of the center of some of our cities. I will stop here for the moment.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Among the many shapes that I heard, you mentioned the K letters. Recently, during a meeting, I learned that there is a possibility for a square root recovery as a shape, which is not very much encouraging. Why don't we continue, Fabrizio, you and I, since you have the word now? Do you see any possible new tool which can be helpful for the business, in addition to the traditional collecting of savings and the channeling through the banking systems? Do you see any new possibility? We read what about the personal assets might be used to finance business, or the debt funds? Is that something new in the financial arena that might be helpful for the recovery?
I think there is a trend which is underway since years, but which is probably will be enhanced by the current crisis. This is trend that we call it. I like to call it also because we started a program like that when I was in government. Which is called Finance for Growth, which means basically to find alternative ways to fund and provide capital, equity, and debt to company, and particularly small and medium-sized companies. These are things that Filippo knows very well. These are not against or really alternative to the banking sector, but it's really more complementary to the banking sector. I explain you why, because these are really at the crossroad of different inputs and different trends, and it's interesting to see what the differences and the similarities between Europe and Asia, because of course in the US you have a market in that sense which is much more mature. These things have been going on since decades. In Europe, I would say we are into it since probably 10 years, but with an acceleration in the last period. And in Asia, but Filippo will correct me, we are a bit at the beginning, so it's full of opportunities. Let me say why I say that this thing of having funds instead of necessarily banks, or together with banks providing funding to company, is at the crossroad of different trends. Well, first of all, because there is a change in the way the banking system is operating. This is a regulatory change, is a business change, is a technological change. There is, the banks are, let me put it that way, are more and more reluctant to do lending to SMEs. In the US, there is no lending by the banks to SMEs, basically. And I mean, the impact of lending, the regulatory impact of lending to SMEs is particularly heavy on the capital of the banks, and the banks prefer to be, more asset light and more fee based, more and more across the world. This trend is quite visible in Europe as we speak. The second aspect I would say is that the SMEs are more mature than they were. So also the Italian SMEs if you look at the famous North, entrepreneurs of the Northeast of the Tri-Veneto, you will find today a level of maturity, a level of openness, a level of let's say of international awareness which wasn't there 5 or 10 years ago. In that sense, they are more sophisticated in their needs. They need response in a shorter time frames, something which banks cannot necessarily do. They need bespoken products. They are more and more involved in transaction with private equity, with LBOs. So LBOs, therefore, with the need of funding which is different from the normal, local banks. So there is a second aspect there, and then there is a third aspect which I find the most interesting, also from a political point of view, which is the fact that ordinary savers are looking for different investments. I mean, the ordinary savers were used to invest in Italian BTPs, govies, or bonds which had indeed some sort of yield, some reward. Today, all these yield is zero or negative. Can you imagine that yesterday the 5-year Italian BTP went negative? That gives you the idea that the savers needs new asset classes, and so they need to put money into channels which finance the real economy. And I think this is a good opportunity and a great opportunity for what is called finance for growth. So this is really at the crossroad of these trends. I would like to, I'm sure Filippo will have comments on that, but Romeo, I don't want to steal the thunder to you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. You paved the way to give the floor to Filippo from his perspective from Asia. Filippo.
Yes, thank you. So the way Fabrizio explains it is very correct. So Asia has a complex mechanism of transmission of credit, which to a certain extent is a little bit even more archaic than the one that we see in Europe. The major difference, though, that Asia has, I would qualify it is this, and why we don't have the sort of instruments that Fabrizio talked about. I think Asia has 3 or 4 peculiarities of alternative source of funding for the economy, which Europe doesn't have, or I don't remember Europe having. So the first one, it's typical of Asia, which is Asia has, and in Asia there's been an incredible growth of the pension fund industry. Think about what's happening in Japan with GPIF, which is the largest pension fund in the world. Think about Korea, think about Singapore, think about Malaysia, think about Australia with the superannuation funds. So those private pools of capital, those pension funds, some of those are private, some of those are public, have a tendency to invest long-term in the real economy, and for instance are often financing infrastructure projects, long-term infrastructure projects, which it's a peculiarity of Asia that we see in Asia and I don't see elsewhere in the world. Another form of financing to support the economy is in Asia existing, which is the sovereign wealth funds, and we have a few across the region. Then another form that is typical only of Asia are the large pools of money that are gathered by the family offices. If you think about it, right now Asia represents roughly 40% of the global GDP, and within the next decade we represent 50% of the global GDP. Asia normally produces around 4 new billionaires every week, 2 of which are in China and 2 of which are outside of China. The number of billionaires that Asia has had over the last decade has moved from roughly 150 post the global financial crisis to almost 1,000 nowadays. Those billionaires then create their own family offices. Those family offices then start investing in the economy, start investing in startups, and so on and so forth. So you see a virtuous circle in terms of financing the economy in ways that are outside of the traditional transmission of credit through the banks. And then the final peculiarity of Asia, I would say, is the fintech agenda or the fintech arena. If you think about some of the largest fintech players that we have in the world, that they are actually Asian Chinese. If you think about the micro-lending programs that companies like Ant has, or some more Lufax as an insurance company in China, and so on and so forth, or some of those who are available also in Southeast Asia, there is definitely a pool of capital that is available, especially to those, I would say, more the retail than the SMEs, but those kind of retail that probably would be not banked and that sustain the economy. Let me stop here.
Okay, thank you, Filippo. I have a last question for both of you. Filippo, you mentioned the sovereign funds, the private assets, the family offices you mentioned, and they provide a lot of money, as governments do with the public debt. The world is inundated with money, and the rates of interest are kept low. So the analysts internationally are very uncertain about the future. A recession will still loom larger on us. There will be a recovery. There will be inflation, or the nightmare of the 70s when we experienced a stagflation at the same time, stagnation and inflation never seen before. So I know it is difficult to predict something in the near future, but what are we going to do with all this money available now that the austerity is almost forgotten also in Europe? Filippo, for you first, and then Fabrizio.
So if you look at the US, or in that context, you look at the Asian economies, starting with the US, we are not out of the woods yet in terms of COVID. There is a high level of enthusiasm right now because of the vaccines. But if you look at the logistical difficulties of distributing and producing the vaccines and obtaining that fabled herd immunity that you require, our estimates is that we require roughly 60% of the global population to be vaccinated. It will take not months, it might take years. So we are not predicting to be, in our mind, to be out of the crisis before 2022. In that context, therefore, if you look at the US economy, the US Congress is right now debating the size of the stimulus package that either the departing Trump administration will have to pass, or most likely the Biden administration will pass next year, because the economy still needs to be sustained. In the sense, there are sectors of the economy, think about airline industry, think about food and beverage, think about generic retail, etc., that will suffer still for months. So a quasi-normality might start to come back maybe by the summer of next year, but it's going to be a long winter if there's no extra money coming in. So there is more need for a stimulus, in my opinion, in the US and to a certain extent even in some Asian countries. And then once we have gone through that, we will have a problem of a large debt that we would have created over the last couple of years to sustain this recovery. In that context, you can have a variety of different outcomes. In my opinion, the best outcome would be an outcome post-Second World War-like, whereby the growth that came out of in the 1950s and 60s allowed the stock of debt outstanding to be taken down just because the GDP of the global economy grew, or at least of the European and US economy, they grew so fast that the ratio debt to GDP almost collapsed. I'm hoping personally that that's kind of scenario that we might see, where the economies will not grow again at 2% per annum, but they might grow at 4% or 5%, 6% per annum. And it's not unthinkable that after a crisis of this magnitude, you could see the global economy growing at above 4% for a few years, and that would help collapsing the stock of debt, and then you will start having issues of inflation and so on and so forth, and then the central banks will do what they have to do and so on and so forth. But I don't want to be pessimist. My personal view is we are not out of the woods yet. I appreciate that there is a lot of enthusiasm in the economy, and a lot of it might be the desire to see that this terrible humanitarian crisis is almost at the end. I just think that we have a few more months ahead of us where the global economy will need support by the central banks and the governments of the world, because we are not out of it yet. That's our view.
Thank you. Fabrizio, the crystal ball is yours now.
Well, I think there is no debate. I fully agree with Filippo. The house is still on fire, and unfortunately, I'm talking particularly about the United States and Europe. We still need monetary policy, and as I said, we will see what the European Central Bank decides today. We will still need a very expansionary fiscal policy. Let me just remind you that we are talking a lot about, the recovery and resilience facility, but we haven't started yet to spend this money, and we won't start until probably early summer next year. So the fiscal policy and monetary policy should really go together, but there is not synchronizations yet. So we are indeed we have indeed spent a lot of money this year, but this money have been basically help exclusively, and it's not a critic. It was absolutely necessary, but they have only help to keep the economy afloat. This is not relaunching. This is not resilience. This is not recovery yet. It was just to pass through, to ford this deep river we had in front of us. And this river is particularly wide because it was not only the spring, it has become the fall, and it may become also part of next spring until the vaccines are really widely available. So I don't think it's any time soon to start talking about tapering or recalibrating or consolidating. On the longer run, the debt. Of course, we are coming from a country which has a very huge debt, which is also debt obsessed. Because of the scars of the past, because of what happened in 2012 or 2013 and so on. I think we are coming a bit out also conceptually of this framework, and I really encourage everybody of thinking in new terms. The discussion so far has been about either consolidating debt, reducing debt, or some more, let's say, exotic ideas about debt forgiveness, debt freezing, debt restructuring. Not all that in my humble opinion is not particularly helpful. I think the word which you use, and we should really think in terms of debt sustainability. That is not a problem in terms of stock. The stock is high in Italy. Is high. It won't be reduced very soon. It will be higher in every European country. It will be higher around the world. What we need to make sure is that it's sustainable, so that our growth is I don't want to get into the technicalities, but in any case, we have enough growth to pay our interest and to provide development for our economy. I think this is the best way to do that, is to have good economic policies, sharp economic policies, and to have the boldness to do a structural reform which are really addressing the bottlenecks which countries such as Italy have not addressed in the last 20 years. Only in that way, I think we could overcome the burden of the debt. And this is the new framework in which we should look at the debt issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Your words reminds me what Nobel laureate Paul Krugman used to say about the public debt. After all, he says the public debt is what we establish with ourselves, with our future. So thanks, Fabrizio. Thanks, Filippo. I was told to give the floor for the second session to my friend and colleague, Ambassador Pipan, for the next session. Miki, the floor and the mic is yours. Miki, are you there? Miki, you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you, Romeo.
Okay. This is you, Fabrizio?
Yeah, this is me. This is me.
I was told by the Regia to give the floor to Miki.
I saw him on the screen, but perhaps there has been a connection problem right now. Alessia, you want to take on?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly, Miki. Okay.
Loud and clearly.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Romeo. So we come now to the next point in our agenda today, which is marked, I think, very appropriately in our program with an exclamation mark. It says at the dawn of the Italian G20, exclamation mark. In fact, it comes the Italian presidency at a very special moment in time. It has been started, as we all know, on the 1st of December, and it will peak at the end of October next year with a summit of the head of state and government. And of course, in between there'll be a large number of very important meetings that will be, of course, specific items. Now, the G20 exercise has always been important. Excuse me just a sec. Has always been important. I think it will be particularly so now when the whole world is waiting for answers and solutions to this unprecedented crisis. In fact, as the previous speakers were saying, this represents the amount of money that's flowing in the world is offering the instruments for an extraordinary opportunity for the world to move to the next step. In fact, it's possibly playing the same role that the world wars played in the last century. It's an extraordinary opportunity to modernize, to leave behind the past and move to the future. Fittingly, the three main items on the Italian agenda are people, planet, and prosperity. Well, if we put these words together in a word shaker, what we get is sustainable development. So this is what everybody is looking forward to. As we know, the G20 activities, and particularly the summit, are meticulously prepared by the representative of its members, the various civil servant organizations. And the Sherpas do lead these national services in the preparation of the G20. Now, today we have the pleasure to have with us to discuss the relation of and the possible impact of the G20 on the topic that we have of our meeting, and indeed to the problems that the world is facing today. We have with us two persons that are particularly qualified because of their experience and personality. They both have an extraordinary experience on this matter. And we have with us Ambassador Giampiero Massolo, who is a retired career diplomat who in his past has been the Sherpa for the 2009 Aquila G8 summit, and now is, between other things, also the head of one of the most important institutes for international policy studies in Italy, ISPI, and Madame Tan-Chin Yi, who has had a very distinguished career in the Singaporean civil service. She's now the Sherpa and the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance. In her distinguished civil servant career in several strategic ministerial positions, she earned herself the extremely coveted Singaporean Meritorious Service Award. So I will, without much further ado, pass the word and the floor to Ambassador Massolo and to hear from him and to maybe further develop on what has been said by previous speakers. We've heard concepts like finance for growth. We have heard the fact that most of the savings would tend to go towards government funds, but on the other hand, these funds, of course, do not offer significant yields. So again, there we have another important opportunities for using these funds, and therefore also a responsibility for governments to use these funds to move forward towards the future. So, Giampiero, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Miki. Good morning, maybe also good afternoon or good evening to everybody. I am most grateful to Associazione Italia-ASEAN and Muzinich Company for organizing this webinar and for inviting me to speak. I actually indeed was the Italian Sherpa for the G8 in 2008 and 2009, and also for the G20 as soon as this formula has been reinvented and brought raised to leaders level in 2008 by the joint action of President Obama and Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Actually, I don't want here to make you think that the bar of expectations can be set very high. Since the beginning, actually, G20 is and has proved as being like this for this last years a little bit an unwieldy form. That is, we are still constantly looking for a word government. I don't think that the word government is in sight. Multilateralism is not running its best times. The formats that we have at our disposal are until now, how can I say, improved to a certain degree coordination among countries, but without really producing the effects that we all hoped. Actually, when I say that the format is a little bit unwieldy, is that if you are in a format like this, that is intergovernmental format and associating so many different countries, actually what you try to achieve is the minimum denominator. That is, you need to get to a consensus, to a platform, and more often than seldom, this kind of platform is not definitely very high in terms of ambitions, and not always this joint exercise of responsibility towards world affairs is understood in the same way by all the participants. Actually, the most challenging thing here is to make coincide views between what we used to call the West, that has been put under discussion, severely under discussion under Trump administration, and what you used to call the emerging countries. It's to look at the possibility of working together in order to bring to coordination the actions of government in fields like climate, like debt, like empowerment of women, like sustainability, like energy, and so on and so forth. Since we still are, in a word, and I will use the terms that our good friend Ian Bremmer often uses, we are still in a G0 world, that is without a leadership that clearly emerged from the crisis of the world liberal order that accompanied us since the end of the Second World War. I must say that I don't have fantastic expectations about what is going to happen. Also because one government alone is not enough if you deal with problems of such huge magnitude in a G0 world. Nevertheless, to say that the G20 is something that is, how can I say, dead, it's highly premature, as Mark Twain would have put it as far as his own life is concerned. So the G20 will take place. It will take place in a new international atmosphere. We have the Biden administration that actually, if what Joe Biden was saying during his electoral campaign, if he will live up to this, it's something like recalling into life multilateralism, multilateral approach, multilateral tools, and multilateral agendas. And here, I think that the chair of the G20, through this power of agenda setting and through its power of trying to be conducive in looking for meaningful solutions to be put, meaningful achievements, meaningful deliverables to be put into the final communique, well, I think that have its chance to be useful and to try to be useful for actually trying to bring to at least for coordination among governments. And here, Miki already told us that the priorities of the Italian presidency are threefold. That is people, planet, prosperity. People means what you actually can do for people nowadays to get out of pandemic. And of course, the third thing is to speak about vaccines and about how to cooperate without actually exploiting medicines for geopolitical purposes and for geopolitical supremacy. And from this point of view, setting a format like the G20 with all the meetings that will precede the summit and putting all the leaders around one table and speaking about common goods, and medicines are certainly common goods, and the health is certainly a common good, can be quite meaningful. Then the planet, and here the challenges of climate are coming to our attention. If Joe Biden will live up to expectations, he will probably try to reformulate, to reinvent multilateralism about issues, around issues that can unite countries rather than put one country against the other. And certainly climate change is one of those cross-cutting issues around which countries can cooperate instead of clashing one with the other. And we don't have to forget that Italy will co-chair the COP26 conference, and so the Italian chair will have the, the advantage of having some agenda-setting power in both those formats. And as far as prosperity is considered, well, once again, you don't have prosperity if you don't have shared prosperity. You don't have an efficient multilateralism if you don't make countries cooperate. And from this point of view, I think that speaking about the debt restructuring, the debt alleviating, and in general, the sustainability of the financial sector and the mitigation of the debt burdens of the least developed countries is something that can speak very well and can be once again a cross-cutting subject as far as prosperity theme is concerned. Of course, there will be also a huge space dedicated to data, to big data, to digitalization, artificial intelligence. And I hope that the G20 will not run the risk of exacerbating here what is already underway, that is a decoupling from this point of view between the Western world and China. And I hope that the Italian agenda-setting power will be centered here on, once again, on cross-cutting issues like access to internet and not divisive issues like, for instance, the fragmentation of internet. And here, what we should try to achieve to the G20 is once again unite and not divide. And so the choice of the topics when you speak about data managing and in general about digitalization is of utmost importance. I see also another topic here that can be of interest. And with the Biden administration, most probably we will go back to more traditional transatlantic relations. That is, we all know what happened under Trump. It was actually a shock for chiefly for European countries. And so we all expect that the transatlantic relations will come back to more moderate and more traditional ways and dealings. Nevertheless, I think that once again, nothing is going to come back as it was, and transatlantic relations need to be filled by new content. And nowadays, once you settle the relations, we resettle the relations between the US and Europe, then the real content of transatlantic relations is what you do with the rest of the world. That is how you cooperate between US and Europe, dealing with the rest of the world. And here I'm a little bit, once again, I'm a little bit puzzled, because I see that the United States have relations with Asian countries, Asian democracies, and with European Union and the European democracies. The European Union and European countries have relations with the US, but what is really lacking is a meaningful container, a meaningful format between Asia and European Union to complement the three angles of the three sides of the triangle. And take something like the regional partnership that has been just established. The regional partnership represents a collective failure of both of the US and of Europe to propose an alternative, a meaningful alternative to Asian democracies on how to be able to work together in order not to necessarily depend on China. And I think that this is the main challenge, actually, that confronts us, that is to offer meaningful solutions, alternative solutions, in order to present ourselves in a united front, in a format like the G20, democracies in Europe, democracies in Asia and the United States, in order to meaningfully be able to deal with such an overwhelming, from the point of view of power, country that is increasingly becoming China. I'm not saying that this needs to be necessarily a contraposition. This needs to be a cooperating relationship, but based on alternatives that democracies can provide. And here's why I think that the Italian chair should exploit a format like the G20 also to achieve a result like this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre. I think you offered us a lot of food for thought in view of the Italian presidency and the tasks that expect Italy with this very important charge that we have. In fact, you throw some water on the fire of expectations, I would say. Of course, in the past, often the G20 have been criticized for being big pageants that for in front of the world without producing much results. On the other hand, you also said that we have a new American administration. We can expect Biden to be the president-elect Biden to be more prone, or at least more prone than his predecessor, towards multilateralism. But altogether, your speech has been one of caution. I think you also touched upon the possible changes on transatlantic relations, on the fact that there might be a reset in that. I think is high time it happened, because it is sort of offered a vision that offered the concept that Europe and the American and US had a vision of the world that was centered on this side, on this hemisphere of the world, whilst, of course, in the last years, if not decades, a lot of the center of the economic world, and therefore also politically, has moved east. So we must, of course, include Asia, which is very strongly coming onto the world landscape. And this is particularly true if you look at the recent conclusion of the RCEP that put together 15 countries, the ASEAN, and another 5 countries, including, of course, China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia. So, and then also you said a few words that are, I think, central and strategic, that are, we have to look to cooperation, harmonization, instead than particularly on this issue of data, rather than division. Now, our next speaker is Madam Tan Chin-Yi, who is Permanent Secretary and Sherpa of the Ministry of Finance and Sherpa for Singapore. Singapore, of course, is not a member of the G20, but has been regularly invited since 2013 as a representative of the Global Governance Group, of which it is the convener, and it has always brought a very important contribution to the works of the G20. Now, I will give the floor to Madam Chin-Yi, and to see what she thinks about the expectations that we can have, if she can offer us the Asian point of view towards the exercise, and to see if she thinks that in particular countries like Singapore, with their extraordinary experience and record on governance, have what they have to offer to the G20 exercise. So, Madam Chin-Yi, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mickey, and thank you to Piero. And I should also thank Enrico for having me here tonight or this morning. Singapore is honored to have been invited by Italy to attend the G20 meetings during the Italian presidency, and we do hope to contribute substantively to the agenda, not because we are big or powerful, but because we have a certain perspective as a small country that has a disproportionate stake in the world, working well, whether it's in trade, finance, or public health. The Italian presidency's theme of people, planet, prosperity captures very well the spirit of our times. More importantly, it takes us from where we are, which is in the midst of fighting a pandemic, to how we should collectively tackle the more fundamental issues in the world, like reducing inequalities across several dimensions, be it income, wealth, jobs, or gender, addressing important issues like climate change, and also the need to accelerate innovation to help us build back better. The discussions in the G20 are relevant, not just to the members within the G20, but I submit that the discussions are relevant to the world at large. Singapore shares the presidency's views that we are undergoing a period of historic proportions, and we need to make clear and decisive actions to ensure an inclusive and resilient recovery. One common thread is the urgent need to rebuild and to reaffirm support for multilateralism and make it work for all. Globalization and multilateralism have been severely challenged, even before COVID, if I may say so, even before Mr. Trump. But things will not go back to the way they were before. Instead, we will need to move towards a more robustly designed form of globalization with more diversification in supply chains and better risk management. For example, companies are likely to place greater emphasis on trust and reliability when locating significant investments. Just in time will have to be balanced with just in case. But it is not just business. Countries hoping to pursue sound economic and social policies must also rebuild trust and forge a new social compact with their peoples. This is a Herculean task and will require continuous work to raise the game for our micro and small and medium enterprises to take advantage of the digital economy, support our vulnerable workers in reskilling, upskilling, and lifelong learning to harness new opportunities, adapt our social safety nets to support the needy, and more generally, to build a more inclusive future for all. This will require the state to play a larger coordinating role to ensure that the market economy can function better and to ensure that society can stay cohesive. I know Gianpiero has told us not to set expectations too high, but I would like to be something of an optimist because we are at an inflection point in history. Just as in the aftermath of the Great Depression and also at the end of the GFC, the global financial crisis, we need to save capitalism and free markets from the worst of their excesses. Not because we love the excesses, but because we want to uphold support for the best of what capitalism and markets can offer us. And the G20 is well positioned to lead this evolution towards a more sustainable form of globalization. Multilateral solutions built on close and constructive cooperation incorporate the much needed diversity of views to resolve and mitigate the complex tapestry of economic, health, social, and environmental problems that we face today. And in that regard, we bear a collective responsibility to reinvigorate support for multilateral institutions like the WTO and the WHO, and support the necessary reforms that memberships have been calling for to ensure that they remain fit for purpose. As convener of the Global Governance Group, a platform for small and medium-sized countries to engage the G20, Singapore will also continue to promote a more inclusive, accountable, and transparent global governance. Here, I would also like to add that by having different guest countries join the G20, guest countries like Singapore join the G20 meetings, I think we are building bridges, not just between the West and the Asian economies, between large and small ones, but also to have a world where we do not have simpler or simplistic architectures for regional and bilateral discussions. I think from Singapore, we believe that we need a global strategic architecture that straddles across regions and builds diversity into these structures. So for ourselves sitting in Asia, for example, we are members of APEC. That's a trans-Pacific grouping. We're also a member of ASEAN, which brings Europe and Asia together. So it's not just a tripolar world or bipolar world, but one where we look for opportunities to build stabilizing forces. They are not fast-moving. They do not turn on a dime, these structures. But by having these structures, you bring people together, maybe a lot of talking, but it's by talking that we get to know each other's bottom lines and positions and begin to coordinate positions, especially in times of crisis, where even some people may not like it, the lowest common denominator may be what we can live with in order to start the process of working together. The 10 countries in Southeast Asia in ASEAN, we have enough meetings to have one meeting per year on average. Why do we meet so often in every sector of the economy and society and in politics and security? It's because we live here. We need to get to know the neighborhood well. And there are many ways in which we can make things better if only we could start talking and start to understand one another. So in short, I think we are looking for Jaw, not war. And I think Jaw has its place in the world. Let me now briefly touch on 3 areas where I think we should work on in G20 for the rest of the year under Italy's presidency. First, on health resilience. I agree with Gianpiero on the importance of vaccines multilateralism. My minister also earlier noted the need to strengthen global disease surveillance networks for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Because even as COVID-19 passes, we should be waiting for the next disease that will hit us. Beyond that, there are also other issues which are always in the background and perhaps more salient now with much weaker government fiscal positions, such as how we finance universal health coverage. Having worked at the Ministry of Health before coming to the Ministry of Finance, I can confirm that it is not how much we spend, but what and how we spend on that we can achieve the health outcomes that our people need. And this is what really matters, not how much we spend. Therefore, Singapore looked forward to the convening of the Global Health Summit in May to put the best minds together to increase global resilience against future public health crises. Second, on climate change, for island nations like Singapore, this is the existential threat. We will have to invest significant sums over the coming decades in coastal defenses and other adaptation measures to protect ourselves from rising sea levels and other more extreme weather patterns. But to effectively tackle climate change, international cooperation is crucial. It's therefore essential that the G20 sets the political direction for a successful COP26 in November to lead the transition to a green and low-carbon global economy. We also need to make complementary moves in 4 areas. 1, acknowledge the climate-energy nexus by promoting the use of clean technologies and low-emission solutions. 2, leverage technology to close resource loops in a circular economy. 3, co-create green finance solutions with our private sectors. And 4, develop effective carbon markets. And the third area, digitalization. The crisis has accelerated technological disruptions and accentuated the importance of digital connectivity like never before. But the pervasiveness of digitalization also throws up new issues surrounding financial supervision and stability. On the opening day of the Singapore FinTech Festival, banker, the Italia Deputy Governor, Alexandra Parazzelli, touched on this balance, how to create an enabling regulatory environment for digital currencies while ensuring financial stability and promoting financial inclusion through harnessing the potential of digital payments. The issue is close to the heart of our colleagues on the finance track, and we have our work cut out. Data, that's a big concept that G20 has discussed, at least since Osaka Declaration on the open data flow with trust. This is something that we need to work on, and Singapore has participated very actively in the setting of standards which all countries can use and adopt, and we would be very loath to see the world broken up into blocks or fortresses where data cannot flow freely and data cannot be trusted. I think we want a world where data can be trusted and data can flow. So let me end by expressing the hope that while communiques cannot express high ambition thoughts in every sentence, the language of the communique under the Italian presidency, in my hope, should help us revive some of the language that speaks to the spirit of multilateralism that I first saw when I attended my first G20 meeting in 2016. I think since then, the language has become less ambitious, and I hope we could go towards a refreshed and updated spirit of multilateralism. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alessia?
Yes. Yes, is that okay?
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps
Please go on.
there are problems, but I jump in. So I want to thank Miki Pipan and for giving me the floor, even it was with this technological problems. And I start immediately with our following panel, since we are on time and we can respect our agenda. So we will focus in our panel, and I start thanking our speaker for the panel that I am moderating, and we will focus our attention now on the institutional development of the agreement that the European, especially the European Union, concluded in the last period of time with Singapore, and we will try to have a more general overview on international trade agreement and investment agreement. So I would like to give immediately the floor to Mr. Bertz, who is for DG Trade, the head of unit in charge for South Asia and Australia, New Zealand. And my question to him is to give us some ideas and the point of view of the European Commission on this important agreement that I had the honor to vote to pass when I was member of the European Parliament in February 2019, and that entered into force in November 2019. The free trade agreement after a very long and complex negotiations, but it has been a milestone for a new relation between the European Union and the ASEAN countries. And it was the first milestone for a stronger and stronger relationship that very quickly grew, as we have seen in the last period. So I really thank Mr. Bertz. I give the floor to him just to ask him which are the views on what happened with this free trade agreement, and which are the expectation on the entry into force of the investment protection agreement that has been also voted by the European Parliament, but did not enter into force since we are waiting for the ratification of all the member states. Thank you again. The floor is yours, Mr. Benz.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. And it's an honor to speak and promote our trade policy to this audience. In fact, I want to set the tone a little bit of what we are doing, why we did it, and what the significance is of our engagement with Singapore, which goes beyond EU-Singapore, in fact, and I'm sure you talked about that a lot already today. No, Singapore is, in trade terms, our largest trading partner in ASEAN. We have 10,000 companies established in Singapore. We have a vibrant relationship, as you can see from these numbers, but we also have an institutional framework for this relationship. We have a partnership and cooperation agreement with Singapore. And as said before, we negotiated a trade agreement, and that idea for negotiating with a trade agreement with Singapore goes back to 2006, in fact, when we got a mandate to negotiate with ASEAN as a bloc. That didn't work out then, and in 2009 we decided to go the bilateral track, and one of the first negotiations we launched was with Singapore at that time. And that was then the idea to have one comprehensive agreement on trade and on investment. Then we got the Lisbon Treaty and the additional competence to negotiate on investment protection. We put our agreement to the European Court of Justice for a ruling. So it got quite famous, that agreement, because the ruling of the European Court of Justice confirmed the delineation of competences between the European Union and member states. And in order to accelerate then the ratification process for our trade agreement, we decided to split what we have negotiated into a free trade agreement, exclusive competence of the European Union, and an investment protection agreement with mixed competence. That had direct consequences on the ratification process, while the European Parliament, as said before, gave its consent to both of these agreements. Only the free trade agreement could be ratified at EU level and entered into force 21st November last year. So we have some kind of anniversary now, and we had a big event in Singapore last week where our executive vice president spoke together with Minister Iswaran. So we're very happy, although it was a virtual event, that this took place. And we have now the investment protection agreement awaiting ratification of each and every EU member state. So far, we have 7 member states that have ratified. Italy is not yet part of it. So that always takes a bit of time in some member states, especially where you have a sub-central or sub-federal level parliaments to also vote in favor of such agreements. And especially in Belgium, we have learned a hard lesson here when it came to our Canada agreement, that some sub-federal parliaments can be quite demanding. So we hope for an acceleration now, but traditionally it takes about 2 years until all member states are on board, so that the European Council can then take the decision to ratify also for the European Union, and the investment protection agreement can enter into force. What does it mean in the ASEAN context or Asia context? After our trade agreements with Japan and Korea, Singapore is the third one we have concluded with an Asian trading partner. It's also the first one we have concluded with an ASEAN member state based on that 2006 mandate. Since then, the free trade agreement with Vietnam entered into force 1st August. We are negotiating with Indonesia. We are hoping to re-engage also with Thailand because there we launched and suspended negotiations after the military coup. We also hope that in Malaysia, the new government will refocus its attention to a progressive open trade policy that is still not yet there. And we hope also that Malaysia one day will come also back to the negotiating table. We have also launched and suspended negotiations with the Philippines, but our focus of work with the Philippines is on human rights and labor rights under the scheme of preferences we have given to the Philippines rather than to engage in negotiations. So we have an active agenda with ASEAN member states. And we hope, of course, that together with the completion of the ASEAN Economic Community by 2025, we will see more momentum also to engage with the region of ASEAN as a whole. As I said, for 2 years, we have tried to negotiate an EU-ASEAN trade agreement that was suspended. We hope to have some building blocks, stepping stones in form of bilateral EU-Singapore, EU-Vietnam, EU-Indonesia, building blocks towards then lifting this up to the bi-regional level. Only last 2 weeks ago, we have elevated our relationship with ASEAN to a strategic partnership, which also includes then annual summits of leaders, like we do with Japan, China, Korea, and India already. So it's the 4th strategic partner in Asia, which is quite a significant step forward and demonstrates how close we are to ASEAN. Quick elements of the investment protection agreement. It complements basically what we have negotiated in the free trade agreement. In the free trade agreement, we negotiated the opening of each other's markets. Once you are invested in a partner country, the EU or Singapore, then the IPA ensures a high level of protection of your investments. It is EU competence, as I said, and will eventually replace the bilateral investment treaties 12 member states have concluded with Singapore. So the investment protection agreement is quite new to us, and Singapore was one of the first ones. It recognizes that the protection of investment, but also the right to regulate of the receiving state, right to regulate the investments from abroad, but only for legitimate public policy objectives like health, safety, environment. It ensures, however, for the investors to be granted fair and equitable treatment and non-discrimination compared to local investors. It also foresees the protection against for expropriation unless such expropriation is done for public policy purposes and with adequate compensation. And the novelty we are quite proud of, we got rid of investor-to-state dispute settlement provisions where behind closed doors some highly paid arbitrators adjudicate a panel between an investor and a state. We have agreed with Singapore, with one of the first countries in the world, an investment court system, ICS, that institutes a permanent tribunal with an appeal procedure with panelists agreed beforehand that adjudicate cases between investors and receiving states, working in full transparency, public hearings, all documents public. You, of course, hope that will never be used, but it's quite unique. And we have obtained such agreement already with other countries like Vietnam. Ultimately, we want to invest in a multilateral investment court to adjudicate such disputes, but this is still ongoing work. A quick last word on the latest development. We saw 2 weeks ago on the 15th November, oh no, it's almost a month now, the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. This is a consolidation of the free trade agreements ASEAN had already in place with 6 dialogue partners, China, Japan, Korea, and Australia, New Zealand, but not India at the end, so it's only 5. Novelty is, of course, to have an Asia bloc now in terms of trade, and new trade agreements now concluded also between Japan and China, Japan and Korea, which we hadn't had before. Once ratified and implemented, and that there are transition periods of up to 20 years, for example, it will certainly hope to facilitate trade in the region. Looking at ASEAN, intra-ASEAN trade is only 25% of trade. We have in the European Union more than 40% of intra-EU trade. So there are lots of potentials inside ASEAN already to enhance its trade relations with each other. But it will also have is an interesting concept, RCEP, for European investors and exporters, because a heavy component of RCEP is in the goods area, harmonized rules of origin, harmonized customs procedures, harmonized certificates. So that benefits not only members in ASEAN, but also EU exporters and investors into the region. So quite higher ambitions on goods. Other areas are considered a bit more shallow, but still RCEP will provide a new platform for further Asian integration, and we hope that this is a confirmation of what we in the European Union advocate always, a confirmation incentive for rules-based trade that we advocate bilaterally, plurilaterally, but also in the WTO. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive overview. So I immediately pass the floor to our following guest, Mr. Baig, who is Managing Director and Chief Economist at the Development Bank of Singapore. My question for him is to give us his perspective on these agreements. So we have seen that the ASEAN region and Singapore is at the core of this impressive network of international agreement. So I would like to ask you which is your perspective, which are the expectations of these new possibilities of rule-based trade, especially on investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening and good morning to everybody in Asia and in Europe. It's a pleasure to be here. Singapore shoots substantially above its size. From a population perspective, we're talking about a country that is in the bottom 10% of the world. But in terms of trade with Europe perspective, it is in the top 10% in the world. And also, nobody signs an FTA with Singapore right now with trade in goods in mind, because Singapore imports 99% of its imported products duty-free. So we do FTAs, and other countries are interested in FTAs in Singapore because of trade and services, for access to investment, to enjoy Singapore's rule of law and transparent accounting standards, which makes Singapore an ideal hub for setting up Asia headquarters of multinational companies. So when we think about what's in it for Europe versus what's in it for Singapore, both with respect to the FTA and the IPA, I would put it in three broad categories. The first is, of course, trade and services. So whether European telecoms companies, European tech firms can get greater access to Asia through Singapore, or just have centers of excellence, R&D, or high-tech manufacturing, high value-added manufacturing in Singapore. So that's a bit different from just talking about trade in goods, but more about trade and services, as well as the investment angle. Second would be this issue of both the responsibility section that is in the IPA, which I sort of find it very important for today's corporate world, that stipulating responsible investment, investor responsibility, it sort of extends one into this world of stakeholder responsibility as well. That companies, are they only accountable to their shareholders, or do they also have to think about the country that they operate in, the society that they operate in, and the footprint that they're leaving in this world? So I think that can be mutually beneficial, both for companies based in Singapore that want to spread their wings in Europe, as well as European companies that want to consolidate their presence in Asia. I think for too long, these things have been just rhetoric. I like the fact that far-reaching agreements like the IPA crystallize these things and add some meat to the matter. Third issue is, and I noticed this, that when the FTA was initially signed, this was flagged by many agencies in Europe, was the opportunity for European companies to compete on an equal footing for Government of Singapore contracts. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars worth of contracts that the government of Singapore hands out every year. And therefore, again, for technology providers, for service providers in Europe who have built excellence in providing those services in Europe, they can then compete on an equal footing with companies all around the world to get some of those contracts in Singapore, whether it is in Singapore infrastructure or else. Then I would talk about the fourth point, and I think Peter Burtz also alluded to it quite eloquently, is the issue of piggybacking on multilateral agreements. Just a few hours ago, I was reading the Financial Times, and UK, Singapore just signed their FTA, and this seems to be UK's attempts to also spread its wings in Asia. And again, I mean, clearly not about trade in goods, but about trade in services, and also getting more market access and economic access. So now with the RCEP deal, which ostensibly is a comprehensive deal, but we all know there the focus is on goods, trade in goods, and also it sort of tidies up whole bunch of other bilateral agreements that exist in Asia. And we also know that there were no FTA agreements between Japan and Korea, Japan and China. And all of a sudden, with the aegis of RCEP, you start seeing some sort of a convergence possibility for these countries in terms of also harmonizing their tariff. So for a bank like DBS, by the way, we're no longer the Development Bank of Singapore, we're just DBS. I just wanted to clarify that. For a bank like DBS, it is very important that as we sort of operate across Asia, because we have major presence in China and Taiwan and Hong Kong and Indonesia and India, that we also benefit tremendously when there are sort of uniform standards across the borders, whether it is for trade in goods, because we issue a lot of trade credit, or it is for financial services, because we also carry out a huge amount of cross-border payments and settlements and custody. So from a bank like Singapore, all these multilateral initiatives that are taking place is outstanding for our clients. It brings down the cost of doing business for us and our clients, and therefore it adds to the long-term profitability of our company. And of course, it definitely reduces risk. By risk, I mean, companies trying to arbitrage various tariffs and then the legal implications spilling over to the bank that is intermediating that. Those sort of things go away by definition when you have multilateral agreements in place. Similarly, in terms of facilitating supply chain type activity. DBS would love to be a part of the manufacturing rebound that we expect in ASEAN in the coming years and decades as China becomes more costly and moves up the value chain. We would love to finance a lot of those projects as Chinese companies or other companies start building in ASEAN. Well, having a multilateral agreement like RCEP in place would be helpful to us, and it will certainly be helpful to our counterparts in Europe who also want to use Singapore as a place to book their profits and at the same time carry out operations in various places in Asia. So to me, these are the four big pillars of these sort of FTAs and IPAs. And again, I hasten to add that I don't think the gain is coming from trade in goods. It's the trade in services. It's the IP protection. It's the protection of or responsibility of investor type stipulations. It's the broader umbrella of multilateralism. Those are the things that are basically gets us excited.
Thank you very much. It was very clear. And so we continue with discussion with Andrea Goldstein, with Mr. Goldstein, that I also thank very much for being with us this morning. Mr. Goldstein is the head of the India and Indonesia desk at the OECD, and so I would like to focus with him a little bit more on what has been already mentioned in the two interventions before the RCEP, because we would like also to have your opinion on which are the possible expectation of this brand new agreement that entered into force only few days ago, in respect with the other network of multilateral agreements that are already in place. Thank you again, Andrea. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alessia, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody. I apologize, but the OECD, our computers do not support WebEx so well. So the moment I put the video on, the whole thing crumbles down. So I hope that you can hear me well, but you cannot see me. And it's a great honor to be attending and speaking at this event, because it's a great way to celebrate a special day for the OECD, which today celebrates its 60th anniversary. And of course, the world has changed a lot since it was created. At the time was a uniquely North Atlantic organization. Now it's become a global organization with a very strong footprint around the world, and including in Asia and in Southeast Asia. So it's a great honor to be speaking here. And you ask about our RCEP, and I'd like to start from something which I think is very important, which is to recognize that RCEP is to some extent the creation of ASEAN. So there have been accusations or arguments made that RCEP is a kind of Trojan horse of China to impose its standards and its approach to regionalization. I think that it's, on the other hand, quite on the contrary, it's a great success of ASEAN. And it's particularly important that this is happening because this is a difficult year for ASEAN. In fact, the regional economy is projected to shrink by almost 4% this year, and this is the first contraction in more than 2 decades. So it's a very important moment for the future of ASEAN, which is facing a public health crisis, a lagging regional economy, some problems on the financial sectors in some selected countries, and definitely the climate change threat that was mentioned by the others. And it is in this particular moment that ASEAN is able to double up and find a new way of growing through regionalization and regional integration. Now, the important thing also to mention is that ASEAN itself is taking a regional approach to the recovery. And the 37th ASEAN Summit, which was held a few weeks ago, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, the ACRF, was approved, which is a very important step in the direction of a coordinated exit strategy to advance a more sustainable and resilient future for the region. And as it's always the case, the devil is in the details. And that's why the implementation plan for the ACRF would be very important, just like it is in Europe with the Green New Deal. And I think there are parallels. So moving to what is in there for Europe from RCEP, from the future of ASEAN, there are parallels because in both plans for the recovery, the element of sustainability and the element of the green economy as a way to improve the long-term prospect, but also as a way to create jobs is very central. And I think that from this point of view, it is important, of course, for Europe to look at what is happening in Southeast Asia and in Asia more generally, but it is also important for ASEAN and for Southeast Asian nations to look at what is happening in Europe. And from this point of view, I think that there are a number of things, of course, that are important in the Green New Deal. Let me just mention 2 or 3 maybe. One is that there is a huge amount of money which is going to be spent on the recovery package, up to 740 billion, and a fourth, more or less, of this sum will be devoted to the Green New Deal, so to environmental technologies and industries. And one area where, which is not mentioned often, but which is key, is the retrofitting of existing buildings. So in Asia, there is, of course, probably the average age of buildings is much lower, and this is true for theory for a place in a city like Singapore, but still there's a lot of potential in terms of improving energy efficiency from the retrofitting of all buildings, where Europe definitely has a comparative advantage at the global level and definitely vis-a-vis Asia. At the same time, there is another area which again is maybe not as sexy as other discussions on the environment, which is the circular economy, waste management. And that again is another area where in Europe, the Green New Deal is projected to create up to 700,000 new jobs, and where definitely European companies are very competitive and can definitely enter into the ASEAN region. Now, as I say, the ASEAN the negotiations, actually it has managed the negotiations which led to the signing of RCEP on the 15th of November. And that is why it is important to look at the letters that compose the acronym to better understand what RCEP is. And now it is regional, but taking definitely a very not stretched definition of region. If you take the distance from Wellington to Naypyidaw in the capital of Myanmar, it's more than 10,000 miles. 10,000 miles from Brussels, from Europe, leads you almost to Brazil or to California. So definitely the region. So it's regional, but it's a much more global, I would say, than regional. It is comprehensive, but as the colleague from the Commission said, there are a number of areas which are excluded. And in this, from this point of view, I think for Europe, the new agreements that Europe has been signing in the past few years with the partners around the world are much more ambitious than the comprehensive the RCEP. So the European definition, I guess, of a comprehensive regional agreement, trade agreement, would be more ambitious. And it's economic, definitely, and that is not a surprise because in the economic footprint of Southeast Asia and Asia in general is definitely remains much larger, much broader than its political footprint. So the focus on the economic aspect of regional integration is something that could be expected. And again, that is a difference with Europe, with its much more deep regionalization. And it is a partnership because definitely the whole idea, which is actually at the basis of the ASEAN approach to regional integration, is to have as much partnership and as little controversy as possible. And a particularly important role in ASEAN and therefore in RCEP is played by Indonesia. So let me conclude with some remarks on Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is definitely important for Singapore, for ASEAN, for Asia, and for the global economy. It is, in fact, the only Southeast Asian country in the G20. It is the fourth largest country in the world in terms of population. It is the largest Muslim country in the world. And it's going to be the chair of the G20 in 2022, so the year after Italy. That means that in 2022, already in 2021 and then in 2022, Italy and Indonesia will definitely have many opportunities to discuss and coordinate, especially as part of the Troika of the G20. And this is, I think, is something that could be considered as the basis, as a building block for that kind of cooperation between ASEAN and the European Union that Ambassador Massola referred to as a desire and as an objective for Italy in coming years. Indonesia has suffered a slowdown already in 2019 in its economic growth, and this slowdown has turned into a recession in 2020, but that doesn't hide the successes of Indonesia over the past 20 years in the 21st century in terms of reducing the poverty, in terms of building a much more sustainable and resilient economy. And few people know that Indonesia has more unicorns, startups that are worth more than $1 billion than either Australia or Japan. So it's really a buoyant laboratory for the new economy and for new technologies, for the digital economy. And it's using this now to its advantage also in terms of disbursement and realization of the recovery program that has been put in place. An important thing is that Indonesia is probably among the G20 the country that has is trying to implement the most ambitious reform program in this year of the pandemic, with the omnibus law on job creation that was approved in October, and that liberalizes a number of markets, including the labor market, introduces eventually a negative list on investment, which is a welcome signal because it will make it easier for foreign companies, including Italian and European companies, to operate in Indonesia. And so obviously the situation right now is still very loose, and it's a country that remains vulnerable to COVID-19. And there's been an increase in the poverty level and the incidence of poverty, but in 2022 with the G20, I'm sure that there will be many more opportunities for the world and Italy and the European countries to know more about Indonesia, and I guess appreciate the opportunities that exist there to invest and do business, sustainable business and responsible business in Indonesia. That's another very important issue, which would certainly be at the core of the G20 2021 Italian chairmanship, the issue of sustainability and of responsible business conduct, which already was important in 2009 at the time of the L'Aquila summit, and that was one of the issues that Italy has been very vocal in putting forward, is the issue of responsible business conduct. And again, that's something that has to be kept in mind definitely when investing in Southeast Asia. Thank you, Alessia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much to all the speakers. You are perfectly in time. If I just can summarize the three interventions, we have seen that when we talk about international agreement, we refer to much more than trade. We refer to a rule-based environment. We refer to cooperation on very different fields. We refer to, in general, the need, and that has been also the leitmotif, what has been in common with all the intervention this morning. We need a new and modernized method of multilateralism, but we need this way to cooperate among each other, and Europe, Italy, and the ASEAN region can be the champion of this challenge for the future. So thank you very much. I give the floor to Fabrizio, so we can end our discussion this morning with the conclusive remarks.
Well, thank you, Alessia. Indeed, it has been quite a busy and dense, I would say, morning. If you want, in a certain way, we did the round on finance services, financial services, and trade agreements, G20 within the framework of the Italian presidency, already started actually from the 1st of December. And I really appreciate also what Tibur said about the importance of services vis-a-vis goods when we think and talk about the relationship between Europe and Singapore. And indeed, finance is a service, and that's what we will also will look at enhance and strengthen in the next years to provide financial innovation to and cooperate on these issues with our local partners such as DBS. We're going to the concluding remarks, and I have really the pleasure, and it's really a keen moment for me to give the floor to one of the most senior and authoritative civil servant in the Italian government, Alessandro Rivera. Alessandro Rivera is the Director General of Treasury. Let me see if I see you, Alessandro. There you are. Good to see you. We've been working together on a number of for several years on a number of complicated issues, and it's never a quiet moment for the Director General of the Treasury. But the end of the year is particularly complicated, as you know, because the budget law is in Parliament, because there are meetings everywhere, from Brussels to the capitals and so on. So we are particularly pleased to have Alessandro, to have your time. As I said, I learn a lot from Alessandro, from his competencies, his technical skills, but also his political and diplomatic abilities. Alessandro, the floor is yours. Thank you again.
Thank you, Fabrizio. It is also my pleasure to have this chance, even in virtual format, to meet you again. Yes, we have had a very good and intense professional cooperation here at the Treasury, and you're right. It's not a simple time, closing weeks of the year, the budget law. As to the meetings, yes, we have the opportunity to use this virtual format, and we managed even to have more than one running at the same time. So this helps us all to save some time. Thank you for inviting me here today and to participate to this webinar meeting, and for the topic that I have the chance to address. The relationship between Italy and Southeast Asia is certainly extremely important. This relationship has been growing since the establishment of this important association, the Italian-ASEAN Association. We very much share the view that Europe and Italy and countries in Southeast Asia need to secure closer economic ties in the future and develop new forms of cooperation. Today, I would like to focus my remarks on what we plan to do also in respect of policies that can strengthen these ties and relationship as chair presidency of the G20 finance track. We will certainly engage directly in that context with important countries that are part of the ASEAN Association. We will certainly engage with Indonesia, and this relationship is going to be also particularly strong because, as you are certainly aware, India has asked to move ahead its presidency, and there has been a switch precisely with Indonesia. This is then the forthcoming presidency, and we will have to engage very strictly with them that will enter the Troika. We will manage with them also the agenda in a much stricter way than with all the other G20 member states. With Singapore, we have decided to invite Singapore to attend the G20 meetings. The relationship with Singapore is very important to us, and we will certainly have the chance to exploit their cooperation on extremely important areas such as financial matters, such as technology, fintech. We also look forward to the Singapore Fintech Festival 2021. This will also be an important platform to enhance the dialogue between our countries. Coming to our presidency, in 2021, the economy is expected to bounce back from an unprecedented economic shock. This recovery will have to deal with the adverse impact of this crisis. It's a very challenging juncture. At the same time, it may offer some opportunities for the policymakers to bridge the response to this pandemic with a much profound structural transformation of the economy, and set the stage for more sustainable and inclusive growth in the post-crisis recovery. Several sectors, for sure, will be exposed to structural adjustments, and it is important that policymakers understand them and, as I said, take this opportunity to set the stage with their policies. Our presidency has actually already started on the 1st of December. It's a great responsibility in these particularly harsh circumstances. The approach that we will follow is certainly built around the goal to enhance multilateral cooperation and coordination, and to help to develop a shared vision on how to shape the global economy. Italy has always been deeply committed to the multilateral approach. We think that this is all the more needed now when we want, again, as I said, design altogether a more sustainable, inclusive, greener and prosperous economy. As you have already heard today, we will group our workflows, our work streams, and objectives and priorities around three main pillars: people, planet, and prosperity. People for all the objectives that have to do with reducing inequalities and promote inclusion. Planet for everything that has to do with the transition to a new sustainable world. And prosperity, we will here deal with technology, digital transformation, productivity, and also at the same time we want to push this transformation to make it inclusive and be an opportunity for all. Let me come to some more specific points. I would start from health issues. This health crisis has shown how health risks are relevant and how they can threaten economic activities and employment. We need to remain strongly committed to ensure that the pandemic is eradicated. Vaccination programs will be gradual, but we will have to coordinate our efforts, including the financial ones, to ensure that the production and distribution of an affordable COVID vaccine is is made on a truly global scale in an effective way, available, as I said, to all the countries. We as a presidency will pursue the principle of public health as a global common good, with a view to strengthen the resilience and the preparedness. We will insist a lot on preparedness and response capacity of our health system. Within this frame, we will host the Global Health Summit in May 2021. We will continue on the approach that has already been followed by the Japanese and the Saudi presidency. We will organize also a joint meeting between finance and health ministers, because funding is essential for providing a safety net by also the health ministers. Second thing that I would like to underline is the important role of digitalization in sustaining and boosting productivity. We will look at digital platforms and the complementary innovations that as ways to narrow the digital divide. We want to explore policies aimed at making the digital transformation, as I said, an opportunity for all, including the vulnerable groups, the low-skilled workers, and people living in disadvantaged areas. We also want to work on financial inclusion and ways to facilitate business access to digital financial services, especially micro, small, and medium enterprises that may lack the necessary digital infrastructures and skills to compete. In a third group of priorities, I would put the digitalization of payments and also the need to bring forward the sustainable finance agenda. On payments, we will be certainly engaged in bringing forward the implementation of the G20 roadmap on cross-border payments, laying out all the actions and the milestones to enhance global cross-border payment arrangements. We will have also to have important policy orientation debates on global stablecoins and central bank digital currencies, given the potential for fast-moving developments in these areas. On sustainable finance, the pandemic has clearly confirmed the urgency that we have on speeding up the transition towards sustainable growth. We will foster here the initiatives to enhance the resilience of the financial system against climate-related financial stability risks. Specifically, we want to close the climate data gap for including the climate-related risks in the monitoring of financial stability. And also, we want to promote an effort towards a broader and more transparent environmental disclosure in sustainability reporting by the private sector. Also fostering the convergence among the existing framework. Let me touch then on infrastructure agenda. The recovery phase will offer here an opportunity for improving the preparedness to weather the current and also the future crisis, making our infrastructure system more resilient, more digital, more green, and also more inclusive. We also focus on strengthening and expanding our digital infrastructure as a key driver to spur competitiveness. On the other hand, we will also promote further efforts on the issues of maintenance so that the existing stock of infrastructure is kept efficient and able to provide its connection and its services. We will also continue to enhance the dialogue between the public sector and the private sector on infrastructure matter, with the focus of on shared ESG standards application to infrastructure planning, infrastructure project implementation, also with a view to attracting more investments, as investors are more and more paying attention to the SDG goals. Finally, I would underline a very important work stream on international taxation. This is a key area for coordination and will certainly deserve continued effort by all G20 countries and from us as a presidency to steer the discussions. The recovery will certainly benefit a lot if we are successful in removing the tax distortions that today lead multinational enterprises to make suboptimal choices as to their investment, location, organization, marketing strategies. We want to reach a comprehensive agreement on the taxation of the digital economy, and this would be an important step forward in order to create a more fair and certain international tax system. Let me conclude now. This initiative today and initiatives of this kind confirm the interconnectedness and the interdependency of the world. Geographical distances have been broken down by the evolution of technological changes and the promotion of multilateral platforms associations. This workshop is an example of how an open dialogue and knowledge sharing can inform decision-making in the economic area and bring also benefits in economic terms. This objective is certainly supported by us, and we are engaged in the promotion of this initiative and also this important association. You can certainly count on our support. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thank you for providing us a very complete overview of the agenda of the Italian G20 presidency, particularly on the finance track. Indeed, we have to thank the G20 if we have these stronger regulations nowadays, which have prevented the crisis from moving from the real economy to the financial sector. I think we owe much to what the G20 has done at the time of the great financial crisis, and you were key at in those discussions. And I'm sure also that when we will look back at the way in which we came out of this crisis, the Italian presidency will stand out. Thank you again. Let me go to the last two speakers, if I may. So I take the liberty to say it's a great couple. The first one is Ambassador CKO, long-time ambassador for Singapore around the world, important businessman, one of the most successful businessmen of the island of Singapore, covering a wide range of activities with his business. For Italy, CK is more than an ambassador. He's really a friend. As I said at the beginning, when there is a doubt, I always ask, how do you do that in Singapore? And he always came out with an answer, which is let's say an enlightened answer. CK, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. I'm afraid you might have over-exaggerated, but I like it. Thank you. My Minister Indranee Rajah and my Permanent Secretary of Finance very competently covered a lot of substantive issues. And I will therefore make just a very few brief points. First, I'd like to thank my good friend Enrico Letta for having, and the Italy-ASEAN Association for organizing this webinar and having so many distinguished guests, in this setting. We have heard much from this gathering of great minds. There is an outstanding lineup of professionals with deep insights in their particular, in their respective area of expertise. And I'm glad that they have shared with us their views how our two regions, ASEAN and EU, can become more integrated and how we can create even more opportunities for sustainable growth. This exchange of opinion and ideas is essential for ongoing conversation promoting international cooperation. COVID-19 has caused major disruptions this year. We are all very hopeful of the rapid development of vaccines, some of which have shown rather good results. But we are under no illusion that things will easily return back, to how they were. So in this new normal, it is even more important for us to rally together, strengthen partnerships, and support global action, as we need to find ways to finance our economies and promote investments. In this regard, Singapore and Italy can do our part to take the lead in our respective regions, apart from our long-standing diplomatic and economic relations. We are both strong advocates of free trade, rule of the law, and multilateralism. Italy is one of Singapore's key trading partners in the EU and EU-Singapore FTA agreement, which came into force in 2019, is a pathfinder for us to explore an even more ambitious EU-ASEAN FTA that will benefit both our regions. The potential to step up cooperation between our respective regions has in fact received a boost due to two recent key developments. First, the upgrading of Italy's relations with ASEAN to that of a development partnership in September this year. Second, the elevation of EU-ASEAN relations to that of a strategic partnership just last week. It is particularly significant that at this crucial time, Italy will be taking on two key global roles. One, the G20 presidency, and second, the COP26 presidency in partnership with UK. In the coming year, many of us will be looking, to Italy's international leadership to improve public health, strengthen efforts in sustainability and the climate agenda, and to bolster global economic recovery, among others. We know these are heavy responsibilities, and Singapore stands ready to give our full support to our Italian friends. I've no doubt that at the end of your G20 and COP26 presidencies, the link between our regions and economies will become even stronger, and we will all be in a better place than ever before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All that, CK, with your help and support. Thank you again. It's my duty to present the last speaker. It's always, let me say, a bit embarrassing to introduce your boss. George, are you there? George?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, I do hear you. I was saying that it's always a bit embarrassing to introduce your boss, but I guess I have to do it. I can say that George Muzinich is the founder and CEO of Muzinich Co. and George is a well-known figure in Wall Street. But at the same time, George, who's multilingual, he speaks more languages than you can imagine. Is at ease in any part of the world, from the city of London to the beauties of Venice, to eating durian in Singapore, where he established an important office which is growing. And George, I leave you the floor, and you will be the last and concluding speaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Fabrizio. You know, when I told my wife that I'm going to give the concluding remarks, the closing remarks at 7:30 in the morning, she thought this was for a conference of nightclub owners. And I had to assure it wasn't quite the case. It was quite a different crowd. So greetings from Palm Beach, which reminds me a little of Singapore in its tidiness, in its cleanliness. Things work wonderfully. But thank you, everybody. I hope you had a good conference. Thank you, CK. When I think of Singapore, I have to think of CK, who represents the success, the dynamism of Singapore. Truly a man who represents Singapore, but is also a man of all seasons, of all jurisdictions. So it's been my pleasure to meet and get to know CK. And so thank you for having us, for our ability to participate even modestly in the conference. Just a couple of words. One is unity among diversity. You know, what greater example than Singapore? What greater example in trying to find a common cause in an area as diverse as ASEAN, as Southeast Asia. So, you know, that symbol and ability also in Italy, which, you know, was that you had the Treaty of Rome in 1965 to, you know, kickstart what became the EU. So the symbolism is there, and, you know, wish you well. Just a concluding remark on finance, which is the area in which we are involved. And I think we're also at a transition where finance, I think globally, is shifting from largely a banking type of financial system to one which is more balanced, which includes the capital markets. And in our own humble way, it's something that we're trying to contribute, is how do we help the long-term financing of SMEs, of mid-sized companies, providing them not only short-term bank financing, but also long-term capital markets financing to promote growth. So we've had the pleasure of having an office in Milan for quite a number of years, and I've now, as Fabrizio said, building up a presence in Singapore, which we hope will be the hub of a significant Southeast Asian presence. So thank you again for allowing us to be partial host to this conference. Wish you well, stay healthy, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, everybody. Alessia, do you want to say the last thanks?
No, just to thank everybody. It has been a very, very long morning. Thanks again to all our guests, and for the organization, also for everybody that helped us for the organization. Thanks again.
And best wishes for the holiday season. Bye-bye.